of the 1980s, chosen from among tens of thousands. For the sake of my husband, I willingly gave up everything to become a full-time housewife. After our son started elementary school, I picked up my books again and successfully got into the Foreign Affairs office. But I was maliciously framed and thrown in jail. Even my husband, a police officer, stood by and did nothing. After being released, I found that my job had been taken by someone else, and instead of supporting me, my husband scolded me. "Can't you just calm down and be a proper housewife?" My son looked at me with disgust, saying, "Your criminal record has ruined my whole life. How did I end up with a mom like you?" Depressed and hopeless, I died. It wasn't until my funeral that I learned the truth. My husband had personally sent me to prison just so he could give my job to his longtime crush. And my son? He knew the truth, but still chose to side with his father, who could offer him more. Then I was reborn, back to the day before I was supposed to take the exam for the Foreign Affairs office. This time I took the initiative and called my college professor. "Professor, I'm willing to go with you to help build the dam and contribute to the country." As I hung up the phone and turned around, I saw both my husband and my son standing there watching me. "Emily Carter," came the solemn voice from the phone, "you have a husband and a young son. If you join us, you'll have to leave your home, and because of the confidentiality of this work, you might not be able to contact your family for decades." I listened quietly, then said each word with firm resolve. "I'm willing to dedicate everything I've learned to serve my country, and I will strictly follow the confidentiality protocols. I'll cut off all outside contact until the dam is completed." Sensing my determination, Professor Molly paused and replied, "You were once my most outstanding student, but this is a matter of national livelihood. You've been a housewife for so many years. Are you still up to the task?" I gripped the phone tightly. "Please give me a chance. As long as I can go to Shanghai and help build the dam, I'm willing to accept any test the organization gives me." The professor finally relented and told me to wait for further instructions. Just as I felt a slight sense of relief, I turned and saw my husband, David Carter, in his green police uniform, standing by the door with one hand holding our son, Ryan, and the other still on the doorknob. They must have overheard my phone call. Both father and son wore identical expressions, staring at me with cold disbelief. David's usually gentle face darkened immediately. "Emily Carter, now it's being a translator, then it's building a dam. What are you doing all this for? It's just because you're jealous of Vivian. Can't you stop stirring things up and just be a housewife? You'll never be better than her." In my previous life, I heard that same line over and over. I gave in and played the perfect housewife, managing both the household and our family, but in the end, I was left with nothing and died in misery. This time, I looked straight at David and said calmly, "I'm not inferior to anyone. I'm not doing this to compete with others. I'm becoming a translator and helping build the dam for myself." David stared at me in shock, a trace of disbelief flashing in his eyes. Then he scoffed coldly. "Keep talking tough. When things fall apart and no one wants anything to do with you, don't come crying." Even little Ryan tried to imitate his father, putting on a stern face and scolding me like a little adult. "If you keep pushing us, we'll leave you behind. Dad and I will live happily with Aunt Vivian. You better not regret it." My heart clenched uncontrollably at the cruel words from my own son. As I watched them slam the door and leave, I stood there silently, full of determination. I would never regret this. I was a top student in the 1980s, destined for a bright future. But I gave it all up for David Carter, to bear his children and care for his home. In my past life, after Ryan started school, I would study vocabulary while doing laundry and cooking, rising early and staying up late, listening to tapes and reading under dim lights. I finally passed the Foreign Affairs Office exam and became the first female translator in our country. But one day, simply because I helped an old woman carry her grain up to her apartment, I was suddenly accused of theft and sent to prison. Although I was innocent and had been maliciously framed, David, as a police officer, claimed there was nothing he could do. That hopeless, unjust 3-month sentence changed my entire life. When I was released, the criminal record destroyed my future. The university degree I worked so hard for became meaningless. My job was taken, and instead of supporting me, David said, "I told you to just stay home and be a housewife." Even Ryan, my own son, looked down on me. "It's your criminal record that's ruined my whole life. How did I end up with someone like you?" Ryan's harsh voice echoed in my ears, full of contempt. "Why aren't you dead yet?" he once shouted at me. I died of sorrow before I even turned 40. My soul drifted above the altar, carried by the faint scent of incense, lingering around the funeral hall. I listened as David and his childhood sweetheart, Vivian, poured their hearts out to each other. My body lay cold, and my bones trembled with chill. Not even a week had passed since my death, and Vivian was already rushing to take my place. "David, you're just over 40. You still have a long life ahead. When our son gets married one day, this house will need a woman to manage it," she said sweetly. David, who hadn't shed a single tear for me, suddenly had reddened eyes as if struck by a thought. "You're doing so well now, rising steadily in your career, living in the spotlight. I don't deserve you. I'm a divorced man." "I've been divorced too," Vivian cut in, gripping his hand. "Don't put yourself down like that, David." Then came her words that cut like knives. "If it weren't for the plan you orchestrated to send Emily to prison and get her fired, I wouldn't have had today's success." She only said a few simple sentences, but they left me completely stunned. I couldn't make sense of what I was hearing, until David stepped back and gently pulled his hand from hers. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "I only wanted Emily to stay home, stop messing around and chasing nonsense. And besides, she used my connections to steal your job. I was just making sure it got back to its rightful owner. But I earned my place at the Foreign Affairs Office through hard work and determination. And yet, in David's words, it had turned into me using his background. What he didn't mention was how he handed the position to Vivian, who only ranked 5th on the exam list. That was true favoritism. When I got the acceptance letter for the translator role, I was so excited I called my professor immediately. He congratulated me, but also warned, "This job will put you in the spotlight. Many people have their eyes on it. Don't announce it publicly until things are finalized." So, I told no one, only David, hoping he'd be proud of me. But in the end, he was the one who set the trap and had me thrown into prison, just so Vivian could take my place. My whole body trembled, but as a spirit, I couldn't even ask why. When Ryan pushed the door open and entered, I stared at him, hoping he'd demand justice for me. But there was no anger or surprise on his face, only urgency. "Dad, just say yes to Aunt Vivian already. Honestly, I've been wanting to tell you this for a long time. Instead of a mom who only knows how to enjoy life at home, I'd much rather have someone as amazing as Aunt Vivian as my mother." Looking at the son I had nurtured so carefully, only to see him so materialistic, so determined to side with David and Vivian, bent me over in pain. Even as a wandering soul, my heart screamed in agony. As my awareness faded, I thought to myself, was this life really worth it? When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day before the Foreign Affairs Office exam. The first thing I did was contact the professor, who was about to head to Changche, and offered to go with him to help build the dam. I came from the future and knew that next year, during the dam's construction, there would be a catastrophic flood. Many engineers and workers would lose their lives, sacrificed for the nation. My mentor, the only person who had ever truly guided and cared for me, would also be among them. This time, I wasn't just going to use my skills to save him, I would also save the countless people of Changhe. The second thing I did after returning was voluntarily give up my spot in the exam for the Foreign Affairs Office. I wanted to see if Vivian could still claw her way to the top without stepping on me to get there. I changed into a clean, proper outfit and had just stepped out when a few friendly neighbors from the housing compound called out warmly, "Emily, where are you off to? There's a great deal on beef at the West Market today. Go too late and it'll all be gone." "Thanks," I replied with a smile. "But I won't be going. I've got other work to do from now on." They looked at me, surprised. "Wait, what do you mean? You're not handling the cooking anymore? That little rascal of yours is at the most mischievous age. You're leaving your husband to do all the chores? He's a man. How's he gonna manage?" Ignoring their chattering and gossip, I boarded the shuttle to Minjin University without looking back. In my past life, My entire existence was consumed by pots and pans. And to David and Ryan, I held the same value as those utensils, replaceable and unnoticed. But in this life, I would live for myself. And no matter what my value turned out to be, or how much of it I had, it would have absolutely nothing to do with David Carter or Ryan. Blending in among the spirited, youthful students at Minjin University, I felt as though I had truly returned to the brightest days of my youth. My professor, who was in the middle of lecturing, glanced at me when he saw I had come to audit the class. There was a flicker of suppressed emotion in his eyes, which quickly shifted into calm acceptance. Whenever there were lectures, I attended class with him. When there weren't, I stayed in the library to read and study. Each day seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. It wasn't until the sun sank behind the mountains that I reluctantly boarded the last shuttle home. As soon as I opened the door, I saw David and Ryan sitting at the table, chewing on steamed buns and pickled vegetables. David abruptly raised his hand and shoved the enamel plate of buns toward me with a loud clatter. I barely glanced at it. I already ate out. You two go ahead. No need to worry about me. Oh, and starting tomorrow, I'll be attending classes at Minjin University during the day. I won't be eating at home anymore. Who said we made food for you? David slammed his hand on the table and stood up, his nostrils flaring with anger. You're a wife and a mother, and you let your husband and son eat plain buns every day? Is that how things should be? I looked at him calmly. Am I the one who forced you to eat only steamed buns? You know I'm your wife, not a maid. That means I'm allowed to have my own life too, not live like a servant revolving around this house every day. David gritted his teeth, trembling with rage, before spitting out bitterly, Emily Carter, you're unbelievable. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Ryan's little legs scurried over to open it, and in walked Vivian, holding a basket of groceries like she belonged there. When she saw me, she paused briefly, then smiled politely. Oh, Emily, you're home. I heard from the neighbors that you've been really busy lately. Since David and Ryan have only been eating steamed buns, I thought I'd stop by and lend a hand. She made a show of getting ready to leave. But since you're here, I guess I won't intrude. Vivian clearly believed that David and Ryan wouldn't let her efforts go to waste and would insist she stay. But this time, the one who asked her to remain was me. Well then, how about I leave their meals to you from now on? Just treat this house like your own. In my past life, I had poured all of myself into keeping my husband and home, treating Vivian like a mortal enemy. David used to criticize me for being narrow-minded and jealous. But now, I was the one graciously handing over the position of woman of the house. And yet, David's face turned red with fury, his chest heaving as he tried to contain himself. Emily, don't think we can't live without you? You don't want this home? Fine. There are plenty of women who do. Once I had fully freed myself from household chores and obligations, I realized just how fulfilling a day could truly be. On the 10th consecutive day of attending classes, my professor came to find me. Emily, he said, now I believe you really are willing to give up your personal comforts for the greater good. Your test from the organization is this. How can we improve the pressure resistance of a cement dam and increase its structural stability? In order to solve this problem, I spent my days attending classes and burying myself in the university library, and my nights experimenting at home, using a wash basin, mud, and other tools for model research under flashlight. There was only a week left before my professor would leave for Changje to begin construction, so I pushed myself to the limit. I stayed up for days without sleep, my eyes bloodshot, all in pursuit of one answer. One morning, just as I was about to leave for Minjin University, I bumped into Vivian, who was up early making breakfast. Her face was downcast, and her eyes were red from crying. I glanced up at the calendar and suddenly remembered, today was the official onboarding day for new translators at the Foreign Affairs Office. And Vivian was still here, which meant that without me as her stepping stone, she hadn't been accepted. David, who had long known she'd failed, gave me a cold look and comforted Vivian. At least you had the confidence and ability to try. Failing is nothing better than some people who chickened out at the last minute and now wander aimlessly, unable to get anything done. Ryan clung sweetly to Vivian's leg and said, Don't be sad, Aunt Vivian. Even if you can't be a great translator, you can still be my mom. Vivian's expression brightened, but she glanced at me and pretended to be hesitant. Don't say that. Your mom would feel bad hearing it. She wouldn't care. She's not planning to take care of me and Dad anyway. I haven't wanted her for a long time. Ryan snorted at me disdainfully and then tugged on Vivian's hand with childish persistence. Aunt Vivian, will you please be my mom? Let's pinky swear. Promise for 100 years that you won't change. Vivian gave me a smug, triumphant look. Vivian turned her head, pretending to hesitate, then reluctantly hooked pinkies with Ryan. All right, Auntie promises. Watching the two of them, one big, one small, link pinkies with matching smiles, I felt as if I'd been struck by lightning. But in that moment, the realization hit me. U-shaped structures are the most stable in water flow, and arched forms can significantly enhance a dam's compressive strength. Almost without thinking, I turned and rushed into my room, quickly packing a few changes of clothes and some essentials. As I passed the confused David and Ryan, I paused and looked at them. And at this house, for one last time. I'm leaving. As a mother, I can't give birth without taking responsibility. I'll send child support every month. For some reason, I caught a fleeting look of panic flash through both David's and Ryan's eyes. Vivian, feigning concern, looked at me with a delicate frown. Emily, I've heard that projects like these can take years. By the time you come back, you might already be a grandmother. Are you really willing to leave them behind? David reached out to stop me, his hand hovering mid-air, then pulled it back with forced composure and tucked it behind his back. Vivian, you actually believe her? Spouting a few words from a book and now she's qualified to go build a dam in Changhae? Ryan suddenly let go of Vivian and clutched David's pant leg. Dad, is Mom really never coming back? David's voice carried a faint tremble. She's just putting on a show, trying to compete with your Aunt Vivian. You'll see. In less than 2 weeks, she'll come crawling back with her tail between her legs, looking for an excuse. Under their intertwined, clinging stares, I turned and walked away without once looking back. I didn't say goodbye, because from this moment on, there was no need for us to ever meet again. When I arrived at Minjin University, eager to share my findings with my professor, I was told that he was in a meeting with the core team responsible for the dam's construction. I waited at the door, luggage in hand, when the meeting room doors suddenly opened. Emily Carter, my professor called out, waving me in. Come inside. Seeing more than 30 colleagues in the room, all assembled for the meeting, my heart briefly fluttered with nerves. But then I remembered. They were the very people who in the past timeline would lose their lives building the dam, including my mentor. That thought alone filled me with courage. I walked in, determined to stand and fight alongside them in this life, to build for our country, to battle natural disasters, and to leave behind something miraculous and secure for future generations. After I stepped inside, the professor closed the door behind me. Then, with a proud open smile, he turned to everyone and announced, "Let me introduce my most brilliant student, Emily Carter." Although Emily hasn't held a formal job and has spent years as a full-time housewife, her intellect and talent during her 4 years in university, particularly in architectural studies, never ceased to amaze me. Polite, synchronized applause filled the room. The professor's eyes gleamed with affection as he looked at me. You've come fully prepared. It looks like you already have an answer. And today, all the key personnel involved in building the Changhae Dam are here. If you want to join us, this is your chance to prove yourself. Grateful beyond words, I gave him a small, heartfelt smile. Professor, I'll need some tools and a demonstration area to explain my findings. I used a public rectangular fountain to simulate the Changhae River, then turned on a plastic hose to mimic water flow. Around 30 engineers and planners gathered in a circle to watch as the arched dam I shaped with mud resisted the force of the rushing stream with impressive stability. If we add flood relief channels at the base, I explained, the Changhae Dam could become not only one of the most dangerous projects in the world, but also the most resilient. As my voice rang with certainty, the room fell into stunned silence. Their eyes were locked on me, stiff with awe, yet shining with excitement. It was as though, through my words, they could already envision the breathtaking, masterful structure that was about to rise from the earth. A serious, capable-looking, middle-aged man stepped forward, visibly moved. Emily Carter, it's an honor. I'm Henry He, the lead director for the Changhe Dam project. We would be truly honored to have you join us in completing this monumental project for the benefit of our country and its people. With my participation confirmed, the meeting concluded after finalizing the team roster and departure time. As the others dispersed, my professor asked me to stay back. Emily, he said, I was supposed to leave for Changhe today with the team. This meeting was originally scheduled to happen on the train, but I postponed it. Because I wanted to wait for you. You didn't disappoint me. His voice trembled, and I saw a shimmer of tears in his weathered eyes. You were once the most outstanding student in the entire university. Your future was limitless, but you gave it all up for love, abandoning your studies and career. I was angry and heartbroken. But now, you've chosen the greater good over your personal life. You've left behind your husband and your young son. While I was filled with joy, there was also a dull ache in my heart. My professor looked at me deeply and said, We're taking the train early Sunday morning, 3 days from now. Do you want to go home and say goodbye to them? I shook my head firmly. No, Professor. They don't need me. From now on, I'm willing to dedicate my life fully to serving this country. In the days leading up to our departure, we stayed busy. Each day was packed with long meetings where we studied blueprints and discussed dam design in detail. The night before we left, Henry He, the lead project director, booked half a banquet hall at a state-run restaurant to host a send-off dinner for our team. Comrades, he began, the day has come. We're heading to Changhe, not just to build a dam for the millions of people who live along the river, but also to fight a war, one without guns or bombs. Still, we must be mentally prepared. If we succeed, history will remember our names. But if we fail, we'll not only carry the shame, we may die and be buried beneath Changhe's waters. I looked around and saw everyone raise their glasses high. Their faces were lit with courage and resolve. Whether remembered for centuries or condemned for failure, whether we made history or became martyrs, we were all ready to give everything for our country and for future generations. Including myself, everyone there had one heart, one mission. We would push forward without hesitation, even if it meant death. Our collective spirit moved even the other diners. Applause broke out across the restaurant, thunderous and unending. Though Minjin was thousands of miles from Changhe, every guest there clapped with all their might, as if their cheers could carry us all the way to our destination. My eyes grew damp. I turned slightly, only to find myself locking eyes with 3 people I hadn't expected to see. David, Vivian, and Ryan had come to the same restaurant for dinner, and walked straight into our farewell banquet. 6-year-old Ryan could now understand quite a lot. He saw this group of people, all preparing to go somewhere far away to do something grand, but also dangerous. He also saw that I was among them. Vivian's face stiffened. A flash of jealousy crossed her eyes before it quickly shifted into smug satisfaction and relief. With me gone, she'd no longer have anything holding her back. She could now firmly root herself in the Carter household and fully claim David and Ryan as her own. But David's expression was the one I couldn't read. I had done exactly what he wanted, given him and Vivian his wish and chosen to leave. And yet his fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His eyes, reddened, flickered with shock, regret, and pain. Before I could even react, David shoved away from his table and leapt to his feet, striding directly toward me. David, don't forget your position, Vivian called out, reaching to grab him, panic in her voice. This isn't the time or place for a scene. But David brushed her hand aside and walked straight to me, his gaze icy and intense. His face had gone pale as paper, there wasn't a hint of color in his lips. Emily Carter, are you really going to abandon me and our son to go build a dam in Changhe? Before I could respond, he swept a cold glare across my colleagues. His eyes finally locked on my professor and Henry He. She's my legal wife, he said coldly. If I don't give permission, she can't just abandon her husband and child to run off. Hearing that, my professor stood up abruptly, stunned. He looked at me with disbelief. Emily. I turned to him with pleading eyes, then faced David squarely. I wasn't selected, I said calmly. I'm only here tonight to send off my mentor. David's expression changed instantly. his eyes lighting up with something unreadable. He stared at me for a long time before letting out a derisive laugh. I knew it. You were just putting on a show. You've been a housewife for 8 years. What qualifications do you have for something like this? Just then, Ryan came running like a cannonball and wrapped his little arms tightly around my leg. He looked up at me, then at David. Mommy, does that mean you're not leaving after all? David pulled the teary-eyed Ryan into his arms and comforted him gently. Don't worry, even if your mom wanted to leave, she's not allowed. Once these people are gone, she'll come crawling right back home. After hearing what David said, Ryan lowered his head and thought for a while. Finally, he looked up at me with something like reluctant compromise in his voice. Mom, as long as you don't keep being jealous of Aunt Vivian and trying to compete with her all the time, the 4 of us can live together. Just like a real family. David's pupils constricted sharply. He pressed his lips together and looked sternly at Ryan. Ryan, don't say things like that. Aunt Vivian and I are just ordinary friends. We're not in that kind of relationship. Ryan didn't understand the complexities of adult relationships. All he knew was that Dad liked Aunt Vivian, and so did he. So naturally, he assumed she could live with them and become part of the family. His lips quivered as he pouted. But Dad, when I said I wanted Aunt Vivian to be my mom before, you didn't say no. David stiffened. His face darkened even more. That's because you were too young. You were just talking nonsense, and I didn't bother correcting you. Looks like your mom and I really need to step up your education, teach you the difference between men and women. 4 people living happily together? My professor muttered, his expression oddly amused. He shot a cold smile at David. So Emily Carter gave up everything for her family, and now you and your son want to welcome another woman into the home? You don't strike me as an uneducated man, David. Don't you know polygamy isn't legal anymore? Having a family while carrying on an improper relationship isn't just socially condemned, it's a criminal offense. As his words landed, a wave of gasps and whispers swept through the room. Everyone around us, colleagues, guests, now stared at David and Vivian with open contempt. Snide comments and ugly speculations rang out from every corner. Vivian couldn't take the public shaming anymore. With a sharp scream, she burst into tears and ran out of the state-run restaurant. Ryan quickly let go of David's hand and chased after her in worry, calling, Aunt Vivian? David's eyes turned bloodshot. He turned back to me with a cold sneer. So this is what you wanted, Emily? You accused me and Vivian of having an affair in front of everyone, ruined her reputation, and now you're satisfied? He'd never changed. Not in either life. Whenever he was cornered, he lashed out without thinking, spewing whatever words he could to hurt me. Emily Carter, he snapped, I honestly wish I'd never married you. Why don't you go build your damn dam in Changi and never come back? With that, David stormed out to chase after Vivian and Ryan. My professor walked over and gently patted my shoulder, trying to comfort me. He let out a deep sigh. Now I finally understand why you didn't discuss something as big as going to Changi with your family, why you didn't ask for their consent. I forced a bitter smile. There was no need. Even if I'm just a housewife with no so-called value, I refuse to continue degrading myself in a family like that. That night at 8 p.m., we returned to the hostel. Since our train would leave at 6:30 the next morning, I double-checked my luggage again to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. As soon as I set my travel bag on the floor, there was a loud, urgent knock at the door. I thought something urgent had come up. Maybe my professor or colleagues needed me, so I hurried over and opened it. But the moment the door swung open, I was met with David's stormy expression. My heart skipped a beat. What are you doing here? I asked, startled, but I immediately realized it was a pointless question. Given his profession, it wouldn't have been difficult for Dave to find me anywhere in Minjin, so I changed the question. Why did you come? His brows were dark with irritation. I'm here to take you home to take care of your son. I've got patrol duty tomorrow. Don't have time to deal with him. I stepped forward, blocking the doorway. I didn't budge an inch. Sorry, I don't have time either. You can drop him off with Vivian. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to help. David's face twisted in rage. You've got some nerve. He was seething now. After the way you humiliated us today, made us look like fools in public. Thanks to you, Vivian's stuck with a scandal she didn't deserve. She probably won't dare have anything to do with me or Ryan from now on." I gave a cold laugh and stared him straight in the eyes. "Humiliate you? When did I ever do that? I'm pretty sure the only thing I said in front of everyone was that I came here tonight to send off my mentor. Because of the blurred, inappropriate relationship between you and Vivian over the years, that's why Ryan would say something like that in public. Tell me, was it really me who embarrassed you? Or was it you two who ruined your own reputations?" David had no response. My words hit him hard, and he was completely silenced. His gaze turned cold and empty, then settled on the travel bag I had placed on the floor. "Emily Carter, how long are you going to keep this act up?" He sneered. "Your bags are packed. Clearly you're ready to come home, and yet here you are still pretending." The more he spoke, the colder his voice became. "You insisted on applying for that translator job, then it was helping build the dam. Now you've run off for a few days. What's it all for? Just to get our attention? You want us to feel your absence and beg you to come home?" I couldn't help but laugh at his arrogance. "You can think whatever you want. I just don't want to go back to that house anymore. And where I go or what I do is none of your business." David looked at me like I was a complete stranger, disgusted, confused, and stunned. Then rage took over. His eyes turned frosty. "Don't push it, Emily," he growled. "If you insist on continuing this nonsense and refusing to fulfill your responsibilities as a wife and mother, don't blame me for divorcing you." The word divorce rolled off his tongue like a weapon. He thought saying it would finally put me in check. With a shove, he pushed past me and headed straight for my luggage. As soon as he bent down and his fingers were about to touch the bag, I spoke calmly. "All right, let's divorce." Maybe it was the tone in my voice, so casual, like I was talking about the weather, that it took him a long time to register it. David stared at me in silence for what felt like ages, his pupils completely still. When I repeated myself, "Let's get divorced," he finally responded, his voice hoarse. "You said it. Don't regret this later." And just like that, just as abruptly as he had arrived, David stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I looked at the back of the man who had once been my entire world and lowered my eyes with a faint smile. Leaving them, I would never regret it. I had thought I'd be too excited to sleep that night. But after confronting David and saying the words divorce, it felt like I'd finally put down a burden I had carried for years. I slept peacefully for the first time in a long while. At 5:30 the next morning, more than 30 of us gathered outside the hostel to head to the Minjing train station. The platform was crowded and noisy. Before boarding, I turned back for one last look at this city I had spent decades in. No matter how long it took to finish the Chani Dam, I knew I would never return here again. As my eyes scanned the station, I suddenly caught sight of David. He was wearing his green police uniform, with Ryan strapped to his back. Judging from the way he moved, it was clear that he had no one else to leave the child with on a weekend, so he'd brought him along for patrol duty. Watching him navigate the dense crowd while carrying Ryan on his back, I could imagine how difficult life would be for them from now on. But I simply turned my gaze away. Because from this point forward, their lives had nothing to do with me. My path was ahead, not behind. Just after I sat down on the train, the woman beside me, flushed with embarrassment, asked, "Hi, I'm pregnant and I have to use the restroom a lot. Would you mind switching seats with me so I can sit on the aisle?" Looking at her anxious face, I was suddenly reminded of myself in those early days of motherhood, alone and overwhelmed. Without hesitation, I replied, "Of course." But as soon as I swapped seats and sat by the window, I looked out and met David's eyes. He was staring straight at me in disbelief, separated by the crowd. He began shouting something, trying to push through the people. His face turned red, veins bulging at his neck from the strain. But with the noise on the platform and the train's sealed windows, I couldn't hear a word. I could only make out his lips repeating the same thing over and over. "Emily Carter, what are you doing on the train? Where are you going?" Expressionless, I slowly took the red pin from my chest and held it high for him to see. David froze where he stood, his lips trembled slightly. After what felt like forever, he finally seemed to grasp the reality. And then, like a man possessed, he began forcing his way through the crowd, rowing his arms desperately to get closer. 20 meters, 10 meters, closer and closer. Then I heard Ryan's heart-wrenching cries from the platform. Mom, Mom, please don't go. I know I was wrong. Don't leave me. His desperate sobs were truly gut-wrenching. Around us, people began whispering and muttering. Which irresponsible mom just abandoned her kid to run off with someone else? Poor thing. That's heartbreaking. Yes, it was heartbreaking. In my past life, Ryan had weighed the pros and cons and ultimately abandoned me, his worthless mother, in favor of David and Vivian, who had power, status, and security. But in this life, Ryan was still just a 6-year-old child. Maybe he liked Vivian for being pretty and friendly, for the warmth she extended to him. But right now, the pain and longing he felt for me, his real mother, came from deep within his little heart. My hands trembled slightly. But in the end, I gritted my teeth and firmly pulled the train window closed, shutting out all the noise outside. David, after all, had gone to a physical training academy. He was still young and strong. Even with a child on his back, he fought his way through the crowd and made it to the side of my train window. "Emily," he shouted. "The doors are closing. The train's about to leave. Stop this nonsense. Come down and we'll talk." His face was ghostly pale, like a paper doll, eyes darting anxiously toward the sealed doors. The moment the whistle blew for departure, he began pounding the window even harder. "Emily Carter, hurry, crawl out through the window, I'll catch you. Once this train leaves, it'll be too late." "Mom, please come down," Ryan cried, his voice hoarse. "I promise I'll behave. I'll listen to you from now on. If you don't want me to see Aunt Vivian anymore, I won't. I'll never talk to her again." Ryan might have been small, but he wasn't stupid. He understood everything. He knew I was hurt, but that hadn't stopped him from constantly clinging to David and Vivian, ignoring how I felt. He and David had both hurt me carelessly, never thinking I'd really leave. They weren't worth my sacrifice. They weren't worth my forgiveness. I didn't move. I sat still like a statue, not even sparing the two of them a glance. David's fist slammed against the glass harder and harder, his voice now filled with panic. "Emily, this isn't a game. You join a state project like this, and once you're in, you can't just come back whenever you want. If you go all the way to Changhae, your life could be at risk. And if the dam isn't finished, you're not coming home. Who knows how long it'll take, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. You won't be able to leave. Don't let your emotions ruin your life. You'll regret it." My ears were ringing from all the yelling. I finally turned my head and looked at him. And what I saw startled me. Not only was Ryan crying uncontrollably, but David's eyes were red too. Silent tears rolled down his face. We had been married for 2 lifetimes. In the last one, even when I died, he hadn't shed a single tear at my funeral. Yet here he was, crying. I didn't know why, and I no longer cared. As the train began to move, platform staff and police rushed forward, trying to pull David back. "Sir, don't grab the train. You've got a child with you. It's too dangerous." "Yeah, man, even if your wife's mad and took off, just buy another ticket and go after her. Don't be reckless." Over the crowd's protests, David suddenly shoved Ryan into the arms of a nearby colleague. "I can't let her go," he said. "If she leaves, she won't come back." Only then did he truly grasp the weight of my decision, to leave and to divorce him. With a surge of desperation, David took off running alongside the train, grabbing at the window frame, sprinting with everything he had. "Emily, in my whole life I've never begged anyone. I'm begging you now, please. Don't leave me, don't leave our son." But the train pulled away from the platform, faster and faster. Eventually there was no more space to run. At last, David was forced to let go. Amid the roar of the engine and the rush of wind, I could still hear his cries, raw and broken, like a child's. Then, silence. Peace settled around me for the first time in years. I let out a long breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. My fingers curled tightly around the red badge pinned to my chest. I cracked the window open, letting the cool breeze rush in. Only then did I truly feel it. I had been reborn. A new life had begun. Years passed. While I was deep in the mountains of Changhae, leading a team through mud, storms, and landslides, the world outside kept turning. I didn't know what was happening back in Minjin. I didn't need to. My heart had let go of that place the moment the train pulled away from the station. Our work at the dam was grueling. We faced disasters, setbacks, even loss. But I never gave up. With every blueprint revised, every barrier overcome, and every speech I gave to the next generation of engineers, I rebuilt myself. I became more than just a woman who once sacrificed everything for a man. I became a pioneer, a leader, a national hero. When the Chang'e Dam was finally completed, after more than a decade, it was named one of the greatest feats of modern infrastructure. And among those who stood at the opening ceremony, cutting the ribbon with trembling hands, was me, Emily Carter, the first woman to lead the design and stabilization of a high-risk hydroengineering project in our country. News of the dam spread. I was awarded medals, asked to speak at universities, and offered a position in the National Science and Technology Bureau. My name entered textbooks. I became a symbol not just of resilience, but of rebirth. And David? After I left, his life unraveled slowly, then all at once. Without me holding the household together, things fell apart. Vivian, once full of sweet smiles and empty promises, quickly grew tired of playing house. She had never wanted to be a stepmother, only a replacement wife. When David's career stalled due to internal investigations into his abuse of authority, she walked out without looking back. Ryan, who once clung to her side, grew up bitter and confused. He learned the truth eventually, how his father had framed his own mother, and how his beloved Aunt Vivian had never cared about either of them. The guilt hit him hard, especially when my name began to appear in national headlines. He tried to reach out once, writing me a long letter. I read it. I never replied. David lost everything: his position, his family, and his pride. He spent the rest of his years quietly in a small apartment, often staring out the window with tired eyes, waiting for someone who would never come back. As for me, I stood on stages. I stood on scaffoldings. I stood in rooms where my voice mattered. I never remarried. I never needed to. Because I was whole on my own. I built something bigger than a home.